Have you ever stayed awake long after everyone else had gone to sleep, not because you weren't tired, but because your brain suddenly decided to replay a conversation from 6 years ago? Maybe you pace around when you're thinking. You talk to yourself when no one is listening. You become obsessed with a random subject for 3 days, learn almost everything about it, and then mysteriously lose interest. Or perhaps people have called you distracted, strange, too quiet, too intense, or even lazy. But what if some of the habits you've spent years trying to hide aren't random at all? What if they're connected to the way your mind processes information? Psychology suggests that certain cognitive tendencies can appear more often in people with strong intellectual abilities. But here's where it gets interesting. Many of these habits don't look intelligent from the outside. Some look chaotic. Some look antisocial. And one of them can quietly make an intelligent person's life significantly harder. People with high IQ often develop unusual habits. Not because intelligence automatically makes someone eccentric, but because a highly active mind can create unusual ways of coping with boredom, complexity, and constant internal stimulation. The first habit is talking to yourself. And no, I don't simply mean whispering, "Where did I put my phone?" Some people hold entire debates with themselves. They explain ideas to an invisible audience, rehearse arguments that may never happen, ask themselves questions and answer them out loud. Why? Because language can organize thought. When a complex idea exists only inside your mind, it may feel like a room filled with tangled wires. Speaking forces those thoughts into a sequence. One idea must follow another. In a strange way, you're not always talking to yourself. You're thinking where you can hear it. And that leads to a second habit. Intelligent people often need more solitude than others expect. Not because they hate people, but because social environments are full of information. Tone of voice, facial expressions, hidden intentions, group dynamics, unspoken tension. For someone who naturally notices patterns, an ordinary conversation can create 10 different thoughts at once. Solitude becomes psychological decompression. But here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes, what begins as healthy solitude slowly becomes avoidance. You stop explaining yourself because being misunderstood is exhausting. You withdraw before people can reject your ideas. You tell yourself, "I just prefer being alone." But beneath that independence may be a quieter fear. The fear of never truly being understood. If this is already making you see yourself differently, subscribe to Psychology Theories because we're only scratching the surface. The third unusual habit is something almost everyone misunderstands. Procrastination. We usually associate procrastination with laziness, but intelligent people can procrastinate for a completely different reason. Their mind sees too many possibilities. Imagine asking 2 people to write 1 paragraph. One person sees a simple task, sit down and write. The other sees 20 possible openings, 5 different tones, 3 arguments, the possibility of failure, the possibility of success, and a mental image of how the finished work should look. Before they've written a single word, they're mentally exhausted. This is sometimes connected to analysis paralysis. And here's the psychological twist. The more capable you believe you should be, the more threatening imperfect work can feel. Your ego quietly creates a trap. If I'm really intelligent, I should do this brilliantly. So you delay. Because unfinished work can still be perfect in your imagination. Finished work can be judged. Think about the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. His wisdom was not presented as having an answer to everything. He became famous for questioning assumptions. But imagine living with a mind that constantly questions. Why do I believe this? What if the opposite is true? Why did that person say that? What am I missing? Questioning can produce insight, but without boundaries, the same ability becomes a mental labyrinth. Which brings us to the fourth habit, replaying conversations. You walk away from a normal interaction. Hours later, your brain returns to one sentence. Why did they pause before answering? Was that sarcasm? I should have said something different. Most people assume this is simply insecurity. Sometimes it is. But in highly analytical people, the mind may naturally search for hidden patterns and alternative interpretations. The problem is that your brain doesn't always know when a pattern is useful. A mind built to detect complexity can sometimes create complexity where none exists. Read that again psychologically. Your greatest cognitive strength can become your most exhausting weakness when you don't know when to switch it off. Tell me in the comments which habit has hit you the hardest so far. I read the comments, and I genuinely like to know how many people experience this without ever talking about it. But the next habit may be the strangest. Intelligent people can become intensely obsessed with subjects that have absolutely nothing to do with their everyday lives. One week, it's ancient civilizations, then aviation, then human consciousness, then a mysterious historical event at 2 in the morning. This often happens because curiosity is driven by information gaps. When the brain recognizes something it doesn't understand, uncertainty creates tension. Learning closes the gap. But for highly curious minds, every answer creates 3 new questions. It's like opening a door and discovering a hallway filled with more doors. And this is why boredom can feel almost physically uncomfortable. Routine without mental stimulation may create restlessness. The person starts daydreaming, scrolling, researching random ideas, or mentally escaping. Yet there's another habit hidden beneath all of this. Perfectionism. Many intelligent people secretly tie their identity to being capable. Perhaps as a child, you were praised for being smart. Adults were impressed when you understood things quickly. Without realizing it, you learned something dangerous. Being intelligent gets approval. So what happens when you face something difficult? Suddenly, struggle doesn't feel normal. It feels like an identity threat. This is why some intelligent people abandon things they're not immediately good at. Not because they lack ability, but because failure challenges the person they believe they must be. And this is where transformation begins. First, separate intelligence from identity. Instead of asking, "What does this failure say about me?" ask, "What information is this failure giving me?" Psychologically, this reduces ego threat and turns mistakes into feedback. Second, give your thinking a stopping rule. Before analyzing a problem, decide what information is actually necessary. When you have enough to act, act. Your mind will always find another possibility if you allow it. Third, schedule deliberate solitude instead of disappearing into isolation. Solitude restores you when it's chosen. Isolation consumes you when it's driven by fear. Fourth, practice producing imperfect work. Send the draft, start the project, make the attempt. Every time you survive imperfection, you teach your nervous system that being judged is uncomfortable, not catastrophic. And maybe that's the realization intelligent people need most. Your mind was never supposed to become a prison you decorate with beautiful thoughts. You can understand human behavior and still struggle with your own. You can recognize patterns and still choose the wrong path. You can be deeply intelligent and still waste years waiting until you feel completely ready. If you spend your entire life analyzing the door, you may never discover what exists on the other side. If you've stayed with me this far, chances are something in this message felt familiar. Subscribe to Psychology Theories, because these are the conversations most people never have. Your unusual habits are not automatic proof of a high IQ. Intelligence is far more complex than a list of behaviors. But your habits can reveal how your mind has learned to navigate the world. The goal isn't to stop thinking deeply. It's to learn when thought has given you enough, and life is asking you to move. Because in the end, the greatest mind is not the one that understands every possible path. It is the one that finally chooses a path and has the courage to walk it.